Hello, and welcome to the podcast, episode 15, where today we're going to be discussing time travel. You may be thinking that this is the most outlandish thing that I have ever covered, and yes, you would be right. It is. However, that doesn't change the fact that there are definitely people out there that are trying to make it a real thing. And I was lying in bed last night thinking of if it ever did become a real thing and it became available to the public, what I would do. And I thought, well, I would obviously go back in time because I have a feeling that if I went forward in time, it would just be worse. And then I realized something. If you go back in time, isn't that like creating a completely not isn't it like completely making a new universe, excuse me? Because think about it. You are making a completely different timeline. So, if you make a different timeline, isn't that like essentially making a different universe? And when you create it and then you leave, what happens to that universe? Does it continue or does it just completely go away? Does it get thrown in the trash? Because if it goes in the trash, I mean, there goes the lives of or billions of people. And while that is probably a painless experience, you're still, you're destroying a universe that you created maybe even just seconds ago. Now, I don't know a lot about time travel. I'm not a not a rocket scientist. I'm not a time travel scientist. I'm not a scientist at all. All of the information in this episode, at least right now, is purely from speculation. And all of that speculation was done while I was 50% asleep in bed. So first of all, yes, this is still the intro, but first of all, I would like to discuss the much more minor inconveniences about time travel. So even if you're creating another universe, you're still on Earth. Not exactly your Earth, but you're still on Earth. And as long as you don't become the next dictator or president that says you're from the future, nothing should change very much from this timeline to another timeline. So basically, if nothing major changes, you essentially have a massive loop going on. Let's say you go into a time machine and you go 1 year in the past. Well, 1 year later, you're going to be doing the exact same thing. And it's not going to be you doing it, it is going to be a clone of yourself doing it. So you have clones and then you have continuous loops. And those loops, they won't stop. They will go on forever. And nothing will change from those loops because you're you and what you did is what you did. So the past you is going to replicate what the present you did. Now, I don't think anyone actually knows how far we are in terms of time travel technology. Not even the people that are working on it, because for all they know, they could still have hundreds of years ahead of them. I think probably the best time travel mechanism that we currently have that is available to the public is webarchive.com. But that's just time traveling to the past on a computer screen. And it's just a bunch of websites. But the thing is, with time travel, is that you could go into the future and you could be exposed to inventions that aren't even out yet. In fact, you could see inventions that we haven't even thought of yet. Now, before I move on, I want to say that there are many such cases of photographs of people from, say, the 1950s, and people believe to see, iPhones in their hands. And I just want to say this. That is extremely possible. Because think about it. This could be an alternate timeline. This timeline could have been created 100 years ago, by someone in the year 2137, and we just don't know it because, well, this is just that person from 2137 hasn't, come out and said, "Hey, I'm from the future and none of you existed 100 years ago." We simply just don't know if we are in some timeline that someone else created. And the really fascinating part about it is that I covered this a little bit just a few seconds ago. We have no idea who the one is from the future. For all we know, it could have been the lead singer from The Who. It could even be me, but it's not me, right? And that just made me think of something else. And it's this. It's that the time traveler, excuse me, may not even know that they are from the future. They may have just the time travel may have just erased their memory that they are. Hold on. I think my microphone is I think the software that I'm using is slightly glitching out. I'm going to see if I can resolve this. 1 second. Test, test, test. Okay, it's working. For those of you who are wondering what happened, I really shouldn't go into the details, but basically what was happening is that the audio pickup was slightly delayed and I had stopped the recording before it was completely done picking up. Anyway, now the thing that I just list is, in my eyes, a little on the less plausible side, but anything is possible, especially in a man-made machine situation, mainly because there could be a issue in the mainframe for all we know. And that issue in the mainframe completely discombobulated the time traveler's memory. So he don't know who he is, he don't know where he is or where he is. He doesn't know anything. Now there are many depictions and illustrations and movies about time travel. Really, one of which I actually know about, and it's Back to the Future. And I know, people such as H.G. Wells wrote about it, but I never actually read that book. And pretty much all other illustrations and depictions and writings I am unfamiliar with. So I'd like to kind of explain the plot and premise of Back to the Future just so I can kind of get a grasp on what time travel is probably like versus what it's like in the movie. So the first issue with Back to the Future is that it was made in the 1980s when time travel was most likely not a thing, but it's very possible that it was. And basically, the premise of it was that there's an old man who was a scientist, and he was friends with a teenage kid who looked like he was in his 30s, and the old guy needed to meet up with the 30-year-old kid, and he wanted to show him something, and it was a DeLorean that was a time machine. Now, the issues with the movie, or the actual movie issues, begin with the fact that he stole the fuel for the car, which is plutonium, and some terrorists are now trying to get him, and they end up shooting him and killing him. And the 30-year-old kid gets into the car to run away from them, and he ends up going 88 miles an hour, which sends him to 1955. So the first issue, actual issue with the movie, reality versus fiction, or maybe reality versus fiction, is that, and I know I always say I'm trying to get away from car stuff, but this is, a very good point. You know, the DeLorean had a V6 engine, which had 180 horsepower and probably about the same range of torque, and it also weighed over 1 ton. And that's because it was made out of the same material that beer kegs are made out of, which is stainless steel. And it wasn't painted, it was purely just brushed stainless steel. So you could see the marks of where the brush was. And all of that weight added from the time machine really, it really should have slowed it down, but it didn't. And another issue is that the DeLorean never actually went to 88 miles an hour. it was because of the speed law back then. It in the United States, it was limited, or at least the speedometer was. It was limited to 85. But the people that were making the movie, they gave it a sticker on the speedometer which read 95. So basically, the first issue with the movie was that they used a crap car. They really only used it just because it was cool looking. The second issue with the movie is that it runs on plutonium. Now, I forget, it's been a very long time since I've seen the movie, and I forget if the car runs on plutonium or the machine. But really, neither would make sense. Plutonium is a radioactive chemical, which doesn't really work in engines, if that's hard to believe, which it really shouldn't be, because the engine's job is to make a mixture of gas and air to ignite a spark, which gives it power. And you can't really do that with a chemical, especially a radioactive chemical. And now that I'm saying all these things, I guess it would make more sense for the plutonium to work in the time machine reactor, or whatever you want to call it. Basically, because plutonium is a fuel in itself, just not really for internal combustion engines. It's a nuclear fuel, which would actually make it would make more sense for a time machine because I'm sure there's nuclear energy somewhere in Time Machine. And I think that's gonna do it for summing up the plot and premise of Back to the Future. Mainly because if I go into the 2015 part of Back to the Future, I'm just going to lose my mind. So finally, I would like to get to the main issue with time travel. Now, as I've said, when you are making a time, when you are going in the past, let's say, you are making another timeline, another universe. And when you make that universe, you are creating it. So nothing in that universe has happened before you came there. Quite literally everything, every single man-made structure has just been manifested. You have manifested the Earth. You have manifested the moon. You have manifested the solar system. You are the birth giver of Jeff Bezos. You. Anyway. So let's say you stay there for a little bit, not too much happens, and then you go back, right? So let's say that somehow these two timelines are connected, your timeline and the timeline that you just visited. Let's say somehow though they are connected. So let's say when you leave, everyone goes away. Because basically what would make that make sense is that time machine is no longer connected to that timeline, so it no longer really has a sustainable way of being able to live along with everyone on that timeline, in that timeline, excuse me. So when you leave and that time machine is no longer connected to that timeline, and yet that timeline is connected to the current timeline, well, nothing's there when you come back. Nothing. It's just nothing. And no one even knows what nothing looks like. What's the color of nothing? No one knows. What does nothing look like? No one knows. So when there's nothing, there is nothing. That is the end of the world. And when you put your mind to it, and there are millions, or I don't know about millions, but a lot of companies that are trying to make time travel a thing, you start to realize that the end of the world may be coming sooner than later. Now, if I'm wrong about this, cover me in tar, put me in feathers, and make me walk down the LA Strip. Or I'm sorry, Las Vegas Strip. I hate California, I don't know anything about it. But if I'm causing some unintentional drama about something that I don't know about, inform me. Because if you know more about this than I do, which I'm sure a lot of people do, let me know, because I would really like to know about this. However, if you think I am right, and have friends or family that you think would also think that I'm right, Share this episode with them. Because if scientists or whoever is working on this has not thought this through, then, to be honest, I could be stopping something big. But if I'm not, I am not. And again, cover me in tar, pluck me with feathers. So, if you know anything about this, let me know. And with that, I think that is all I have to say. Have a good day, and know that DeLoreans are a waste of money.